May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Our chalice lighting this morning is from the words of Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by the spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Time for All Ages. I just want to say thank you again to Reverend Sam for inviting me back to Church of the River again. It's always good to be with you all, even if it's through electronic media and virtually, as we have it as the case these days. So for our All Ages time today, I wanted to talk with you a bit about coughing and sneezing and covering up and masks. Are you all ready for that conversation? Let's get into it. So back in the old days, this is how we used to cover ourselves when we would sneeze. We'd go, achoo, like that. Can you do that? Achoo. Can you see why that would not be like a great idea? Right, because if you cough or you sneeze into your hands, what happens if you touch somebody else's hand? What happens then? If you've got like a cough or germs or anything, then you're spreading that to somebody else, because what was on in your mouth is now on your hand and is now like on that other person's hand over there. So over time, we figured out a better way to cough or to sneeze. Do you know what that looks like? I'm gonna show you. It looks like this. Choo! Choo! And that's how we do the cough or the sneeze now. Now, what's the advantage of that? Now, what's come out of your mouth and off of your breath is not on your hands, not on your hands. So when you hold somebody else's hand, you can't pass any germs that way. Where is it? It's right there. It's on your sleeve. It's right there on the sleeve. So that's a better place, because at least that way you're not putting yourself in putting your germs, what's coming from you, in direct contact with somebody else who may or may not have that. So now that we're in this time of COVID-19, I imagine all of you have heard of that. It's a infection. It's a virus that's going around that is making life hard for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And we don't want anyone to have to deal with that. And you've probably heard all of this before. So now what are we doing? We're putting something over our face, because it's through the moisture and the vapors and the things that come out of our mouths that the virus gets spread. So we're trying to protect ourselves and protect others at the same time. So when it first began, I didn't have like a mask that I could wear. So I started off by wearing this. It's a bandana. And so I would put it over my face like this. Well, I would tie it in the back, but I'm not going to do that now just because it makes it easier. And that's how I would wear it. Looks a little bit like some of the old Western shows that we saw back in the day, if there was a bandit or someone who was trying to steal something. So I've worn this before sometimes. It works well. And then I was at an event and someone gave me one of these. This is what? It's a surgical mask. It was what a doctor uses in an operating room, or a nurse or anyone else who's trying to protect themselves, and it goes like that. And that's a way of protecting myself. Now, what's the advantage to this? You can still hear me, you can still see me, but now the moisture and the germs and whatever, and the viruses, whatever I've got in my mouth, is staying what? On the inside of the mask to some extent, at least part of it. Most of it, we hope so. So it's kind of like doing what? Coughing or sneezing into your sleeve like that. So that's a form of protection. And then I've got this other mask that I've got. It's kind of a multi-purpose thing, but sometimes I wear this when I'm trying to be kind of stylish and cover up at the same time. I'm not going to do it. Maybe I won't do it now. But I can put this like all the way over, and it goes like over my head and down. Well, I'll do it like to show you. It goes like that. And that's another way to keep the moisture with me instead of going out to other people. Now, you can't wear it like this. That doesn't work. Because what? There's still moisture coming out of my nose, so I have to cover up like that. Now, why are we talking about this today? Why do you think it's important to talk about this? Well, I'll tell you. One of the things that we're talking about today that's really important is how we have to understand ourselves in relationship to other people. It's not just about me and what's good for me, but I'm trying to do what's not just good for me, but is in the best interest of everyone around me as well. So what that means is that even when we're out in public, say at the grocery store or in some other place where there's other people around, we want to cover up. We want to keep our germs and any virus that we might have to ourselves, because sometimes people have this COVID-19 virus and they don't even know it. And so to keep other people safe, I would put on my mask, and I would encourage you to do the same thing. And when we see ourselves in this broader way, not just looking out for ourselves, but looking out for those around us, we're really doing what we say we want to do as Unitarian Universalists, which means that we value other people, we care about them and what's going on with them, and we care about their health. So even though I might think that I myself don't have the virus and I'm not scared of other people having the virus, I could still have it and I could still spread it and pass it on to other people. So that's why it's important to have some kind of covering over your face when you're encountering other people, so that we're not only keeping ourselves safe, but keeping other people safe as well, and showing people how we live out our values as Unitarian Universalists, because we care not just about ourselves, but about other people too. And that is the end of our time for all ages. You are beloved, you are important, you are powerful. Go in peace. Our first reading today is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, verses 41 through 44, and is known as the widow's offering. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more money into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." So ends the first reading. The second reading is very brief and is from Eliel Saarinen, who was the father of Eero Saarinen, the designer of the Gateway Arch. Eliel Saarinen was also an architect. I'll read it through twice. Always design a thing by considering it in its next largest context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment, and an environment in a city plan. Again, always design a thing by considering it in its next largest context: a chair in a room in a house in an environment, and an environment in a city plan. We'll begin our time of prayer and meditation with a few moments of silence together, about 20 seconds. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Spirit of life, known by many names, which is us and is all around us, we appreciate our lives. We appreciate each other. We appreciate the many connections that bind us together. We appreciate this community and all the many people, past and present, who have nurtured and sustained it over many years. We are grateful for this land and the indigenous people who first called it home. May we strengthen our resolve to honor their ways and their descendants. We are grateful for the laborers, some free and some not, whose work benefits us to this day. May we honor their contributions and their descendants. We pay tribute to the patriots who, through love and human kindness, transformed the nation forever. We connect this hour to those who are suffering, who are hungry and in pain. May our circles of care expand and overlap so that they become real in more and more lives. May we remember to be gentle and kind to ourselves, especially when things are already so difficult. We lift up our world that is our only home. May we be stewards of it as we need to be. Life is the greatest gift of all the riches of this earth. Life and its creatures, great and small, of high and lowly birth. So treasure it and measure it with deeds of shining worth. And so it is.
To the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Every day, women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman man up. They say stay down, we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. We pointed to the mountaintop, we ran up.
One day glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 glory. Now the war is not over, victory is enough, but we'll fight on to the end. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, glory, oh glory, 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 glory.
Selma's down for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crowd in front of a crowd. We marched with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads he rose to become a hero. Faced the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream, we had epiphanies. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders, the young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call Victoria. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 one day.
The words of our offering are number 674 in our hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. I bring greetings today toward the end of the 3-day weekend because yesterday was Independence Day, when we as a country celebrate our founding, when we threw off the shackles of oppression under the British and declared our separation, our independence from the United Kingdom. Of course, for those of us born and raised in this country, we know this story, this history from the angle of the founders of the nation, the wealthy white male property owners who created the rules that govern so much of our lives to this day. It is a system of dominance that some are desperate to maintain. One of my frames of reference when I think about the United States is the city of New Orleans. I love being in that Caribbean port city. There's something about the mixing and melding of cultures and cuisines and accents and languages and music over many generations that I find deeply satisfying and enriching. Yet the city itself sits below sea level. Without the infrastructure of levees and canals that usually keep the water from flooding neighborhoods, it couldn't survive as we know it. Yet we love it, and so we do all that we can to maintain it. Like New Orleans, the United States sits in a bowl, not a geographic bowl, but a sociological bowl. The world is overwhelmingly made up of Black and brown people, or at least those who don't count as white inside the white colonial framework this country is based upon. The white majority of the country is disappearing even as I speak, so that by the middle of this century, white Americans will join the ranks of other Americans who represent less than half of the country. As a frame of reference, I never think of myself as a part of an ethnic minority. Black for me is a geopolitical identity I hold that has significant implications for every aspect of my life. In a country that has been defined by a white majority since its genocidal and slaveholding origins, being Black would make me a minority, but I can see beyond that. I can see myself in my next larger context, as the Elio Saarinen quote points us to. In a world made up of overwhelmingly Black, brown, and other non-white people, I'm actually part of the global majority. That the United States is looking more and more like the global majority should not be a shock, especially with the advances in transportation, travel, and in some cases, less racist immigration policies. But the country as a whole has its past as a frame of reference. From a mainstream perspective, white is by definition the majority here, regardless of what the numbers say. This is how we get what I would call nonsensical language like majority, minority. Language which reveals that minority really means inferior as much as it means being at a numerical disadvantage. And I'll be honest, it's not always easy to love a country that doesn't seem to love you back. The same Constitution that we are taught to venerate in our civil religion defined ancestors of mine as 3/5 human. Let's look for a moment at Langston Hughes's poem, Let America Be America Again. In it, he begins with laudatory words about the country, typical of what we are used to hearing on the 4th of July and in political speeches. Yet, in parentheses after each stanza, there are retorts that occur as whispers which say, America was never America to me, and there's never been equality for me. Eventually, the laudatory speaker asks, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And the voice comes back in language that was common at the time of its writing. I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same stupid old plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. Hughes goes on to weave in the plight of other marginalized groups and concludes by imploring them all to reclaim the nation from the greedy criminals and oppressors who make their lives hard. In the end, he writes, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plains, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Hughes wrote this poem many decades ago, yet it's incredibly relevant to where we find ourselves today. The slogan, Make America Great Again as we know it today, has the 20th century as its reference point, and particularly prior to the victories of the Civil Rights era. It was a world in which white male dominance went largely unquestioned and was something to celebrate in itself. Hughes's reference point was different. He seems to be hearkening back to what the land might have been like before it was colonized by European settlers, an idyllic vision that has yet to be realized and actually points to the future. He says explicitly, oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free. And I would add, indeed, the land where everyone is free. The struggle continues. Back in 1992, Rodney King asked plaintively after he saw his city of Los Angeles in flames as a result of the acquittal of the officers who had beaten him, can't we all just get along? And apparently we can't, in particular because we don't share the same points of reference. Take, for instance, the question of abolishing or defunding the police. I was on a Zoom meeting not that long ago where an older white man expressed his concern about the lives that might be lost if the police are not around to respond to crisis situations. I, on the other hand, raised the point that for some of us, we are already losing precious lives to police violence because they are licensed to kill and to this point have not proven themselves capable of self-correction within their own ranks. In spite of the many police dramas on television indicating that the police are always and forever the good guys with guns, the nightly news and my lived experience tell a different story. The senseless deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Tony McDade, and so many others tell a different story. When I lived in Boston, in the Boston area in the early 2000s, I was one of many people advocating for and promoting marriage equality. A few times, I found myself in front of the State House, where people from all over Massachusetts and even the country came to make their support or opposition to same-sex marriage known to legislators. Emotions were very high on those streets back then, not dissimilar from what we see today with regards to protest against police violence and killings. People yelling back and forth at each other, in each other's faces, trying to have a conversation, or rather not trying to have a conversation, but instead to beat each other down with words and outrage, which in itself is a kind of violence. In all that heat of emotion I observed, I remember thinking, a lot of these conversations needed to happen at home. If more people were speaking honestly and being vulnerable with the people in their lives, they wouldn't feel the need to shout at strangers in the street. And here is where we circle back around to the widow's offering from the Gospel of Mark. To everyone looking, it seemed that the woman who added her few coins to the temple collection hadn't really done anything noteworthy. Was her 2 cents enough to buy oil for lamps, or incense, or animals to sacrifice? Could they buy vestments for the priests, or feed masses of hungry people? No. Her small contribution couldn't, but the measure of the woman's offering was not its purchasing power, but her faithfulness. I'll say that again. The measure of the woman's offering was not its purchasing power, but her faithfulness. It's somewhat easy to donate $500 to the congregation when you make $5,000 a month. But what about when you give $50 and only receive a few $100s a month in government assistance? The sacrifice in the latter case is greater because of the faithfulness that it represents. There's a place for showing up in public for protest and speaking from platforms to make the case for why Black Lives Matter, for example. Many of us have opportunities to publicly perform our commitment to social justice, especially when we have the assurance that we will be surrounded by throngs of other like-minded people. It's easy to take a knee and protest to police brutality once it's popular to do so. But what about when disrupting business as usual is unpopular? What about when you are the only one, as Colin Kaepernick was for years, even costing him his career in Major League Football and having to deal with threats to his life? Moreover, where are we to be found in our daily lives once the news cycle has moved on and we are sitting across the table from family and friends who say uninformed or cruel or hateful things? Sometimes in those intimate settings, it costs us more to be our true selves and to have our words aligned with the faithful, courageous image that we would have of ourselves. Happily, in our liberal religious tradition, we don't have to get too attached to any one moment in time. As we often quote the ancient Persian poet Rumi, though you've broken your vows 10,000 times, come, yet again come. Even if we didn't live up to our expectations of ourselves today, tomorrow, if we're so favored to see it, will provide other occasions and pop quizzes from life for us to see where we are in relationship to who we say we are. And that, my friends, is where I see us this 4th of July weekend as a country, in the midst of a global pandemic and a tremendous social uprising. We are seeking and finding points of reference that inform who we are and what we are doing with the precious days of our lives. I pray that we are guided by a vision of our nation and our world where the spirit of love and generosity abound. And so it is. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. Depart in peace, assured that love surrounds you everywhere you may go.
Down by the riverside, lay down.